Neil Clarke, welcome to Head on Fire. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So, you have made some headlines recently. I don't often get to speak with somebody the week that they appear in both the New York Times and on the front page of NPR. So, how's your life going? Tell folks a little bit about you and what it is that you do and how your life's going lately.
Okay, well, I'm Neil Clarke. I'm the publisher and editor of Clarkesworld magazine, which is a science fiction and fantasy magazine. And my life got turned upside down by a bunch of people submitting AI drafted stories to us, basically flooding our submissions. And so we closed submissions, and it just took off online. It went ballistic.
And it means quite a bit for Clarkesworld, of all places, to have your submissions closed for the time being, because you had the distinction of always being open to submissions.
It's how we get all our stories, and we've only, in the last decade, we've only closed for software updates and server updates. So this was an unexpected disruption.
So I want to get there, because I feel like, there's going to be people that are Googling you that find this podcast, and that's what they hear want to hear you talk about. But that isn't all. I mean, that is a tiny blip in both your life, your career, and the life of Clarkesworld. So I'd like to, first start with you. What is your entry into science fiction? How'd you get started in publishing? Where did Clarkesworld come from?
Okay, so I got started in science fiction when I was 10. My cousin gave me 3 books, and one of them was an anthology of short stories. And that book sort of got me hooked on short fiction. And so, I've been a fan for a long time. And at age 40, a conversation with somebody at a science fiction convention led to the creation of Clarkesworld. And here we are, 17 years later, still going. Much to my surprise. I never expected this to be my career. My background's in computer science. I worked in education and in technology for a long time. But a few years ago, I went full time doing this, and I found another job I love.
That's amazing, and it's pretty rare that people. Yeah. I mean, that you can say that. I mean, how many of us get to do something that we genuinely love to do? Science fiction's probably changed quite a bit since you first found it at the age of 10. I know, I discovered it probably around the same time. My first loves were the Dark is Rising sequence, and Susan Cooper and Animorphs, of course. It was formative for me. How has science fiction? How have you seen science fiction change over the course of your love affair with it?
Oh, I think I want to say the writing has gotten better in some ways. I know that there's people that romanticize the older stuff, but I think that science fiction stands on the shoulder of giants. It wouldn't have gotten there without them. And each generation finds another way to build on that. And I think that's one of the beauties of the form. So it's not a slam against the older works. It's really, much respect for what was done. That's where I got my start, was on the older stuff. But it's also much more international than it once was. It's a much broader community. We can also talk about science fiction in public without being shamed. Or mocked or whatever.
I mean, I grew up a weird kid obsessed with comic books, and shock of all shocks, in the last few years, not only have comic books become the movie industry, but now comic books are like the popular kids. Like now science fiction, supernatural, superhero stories, now they're the popular kids, and it's weird because suddenly what I thought was like counterculture, nerd culture, geek culture this whole time is now we're the popular kids at the table, and everybody hates us because we're just too popular. And that's weird. That's strange.
Never saw it coming.
Never.
I always knew it was
once.
Good, but
what was your first science fiction magazine? I think I remember picking one up at like a garage sale with my grandmother. It was still graphic novel. It was a bunch of like short graphic stories, and some of them were very adult, and some of them were not. And I remember thinking, like, this, it just blew my mind. In addition to comic books, like, it was just this whole other magazine of stories and short, comics and stuff. What was your first one? What made you fall in love with the medium?
Well, I can't remember what the first magazine was. I remember the first magazine I subscribed to was Omni.
Mm.
But I know I had copies of Asimov's and FNSF and all of those, and even the ones from older ones, Galaxy and If, and stuff I could find at the used bookstore as a kid and pick up for a dime. It was largely that would be my exposure on there. I know the first, that anthology that introduced me was Adventures in Time and Space, or Space and Time. I keep mixing it up. By Healy and McComas, which is a classic Golden Age anthology, and it's a monster of a book.
Were you ever a comic kid?
I was. The store next to the deli next to my dad's shop used to have a small rack of comics, and anytime I'd spend time over there, I'd go over and grab some. And but I didn't stick with it. And in college, a friend of mine dragged me into some of the more oddball stuff, but I didn't keep up with it.
So you've been doing Clarkesworld for 17 years. And like, I kind of set up at the top, these most recent challenges are not the first time that science fiction publishing has hit some speed bumps. What major challenges have magazines and publishers faced before, and how are the current challenges different?
Well, when we launched, 17 years ago, there weren't really ebooks, or at least not widespread adoption. There were some early instances of them, but you couldn't really make money doing that. You still had to rely on either people donating money to you, or with no Kickstarter or Patreon or any of the things we have now that make it a little bit easier to survive. And there wasn't much respect for the form. Not short fiction. Short fiction, there's always been fans of that, but online short fiction was considered by those that were maybe more senior in the field as the place where newbies are. That's actually had several of them tell me that they wouldn't publish online because that was for newbie writers and their work would be pirated. They were all worried about piracy back then. They're less worried about it now, but it still happens. So that was one of the big challenges, and it took about 3 years in before we started noticing that, hey, that's not happening anymore. Some of these people that are sending us stories are established. We didn't have to bug them. we didn't have to convince them we were legit. So there was a lot of that in the early days. But financially, it's never really been a strong thing. It's been very difficult to earn a living here, and most of the editors that are working on short fiction magazines, particularly online magazines, are either paid a token amount or volunteering their labor. Very few of them are actually paid more than a small amount. So it makes it very hard to try and earn a living at this. There's also a lot of markets, and since content is free in a lot of these places, people don't feel the need to pay for it. Less than 10% of the people who are reading online fiction are paying for it.
So let's talk about people paying. So a lot of magazines obviously rely on subscribers, right? They rely on people paying you a weekly or monthly or quarterly sum to get the work that you guys produce, and you guys are able to sort of project out how many stories you can take, what kind of staff you're able to keep, how much each of those people can be paid based on projections from your current subscriber base. There is a waning of people willing to pay weekly, monthly, quarterly, annually for this kind of content. how is this affecting the industry? How has this affected Clarkesworld? And where are those people getting their stories, if not from paid platforms?
Well, I think one of the things that's happened is a lot of magazines go out of business for that very reason. They don't they don't manage to raise enough money to cover their costs and eventually close. It was worse, believe it or not, years ago when we started. The advent of ebooks and things like that generates some opportunities to make some money. You'll find some of them are relying on Kickstarter campaigns that they might do annually. And that just puts chills down my spine to have that do or die one moment each year where you may not be able to continue. I don't know that I couldn't live that way. But yeah, we know how many subscriptions we're getting. We gives us a sense of what our budget's going to be for the next few months. There's always fluctuation, so you have to play it safe. We started small and grew into where we are now. Our first year was 2 stories and a cover. That was it.
Wow.
We're now 6 to 8 stories that are much longer. 2 interviews, an article, an editorial, and a cover. But we have more platforms to earn a living. The big coming problem, however, is that several magazines were in Amazon's subscription program, and they are ending that in September. So that revenue stream is being cut off. And worse, we don't know who those subscribers were.
Oh, no.
Uh-huh.
So I didn't even realize that was a problem inside of the industry. So these are folks that are getting magazines through Amazon, obviously in a quick click, in an environment where they already exist. They're already on the Amazon website, which of course is ease of use and isn't, what's the confidence level that they're going to continue to try to go seek you out? Like, go to the Clarkesworld website, go to, and find another way to get that.
Not so good. I mean, we've been through this before. We had an app that we were using for subscriptions, and the company got bought and stopped paying us. So we terminated our relationship with them.
Yikey do.
But trying to recover those subscribers, we think we retained maybe a quarter of them. It's tough. The only way we can reach them is through the magazine. So we've got, we just put out our March issue. The March issue has a special thing in it that's only in the subscriber edition, saying your subscription is ending in September. Please stay with us. Here's where you can go to find out more information. Amazon will be sending out an email to them at some point later. But we have until September to recover them. And that's a very worrying state for, the round a dozen magazines, a dozen science fiction magazines that are in there. But there's tons of other magazines in that program as well. Some of us are being invited into a Kindle Unlimited program where, see, and that's exactly the reaction you should have. But a number of us have been declined from that. It's slightly different than the way they handle the Kindle Unlimited books. We have a guaranteed amount of money we'll get, but I can't say much more about the program other than that. I can say it's substantially less than we were earning. But that might be the difference between living or dying, considering how many subscribers we had there.
Oh, goodness gracious. Yeah, Kindle Unlimited. I guess a quick redux for people that don't know, Kindle Unlimited is a program through Amazon where you pay a very small monthly fee, and you can read all of the books that you want that are inside of the Kindle Unlimited program. Just as many books. There's no limit. You just keep reading. And it's sold around social media as like a place to make a quick buck for like especially self-published writers. Like, I'm going to write these short. Erotica has done, I guess, well on it because that's a big part of Kindle Unlimited. Some of the spicier genres, I guess, if it's fairies and a bulging member, it will do well on Kindle Unlimited. At least that's the way it's sold on various book talks and Bookstagram, and it's weird because I've never seen a Kindle Unlimited like millionaire before. It doesn't. I mean, it doesn't seem, the reality of how much that pays out and how much it rewards its authors doesn't seem to be matching up with the promise of either the people who are behind the program or the people who seem to be very loud champions of it either.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about the writers. Let's talk about writers.
Okay.
Have you seen people, have you seen a change in the number of people trying to submit to your magazine? Are people still trying to write short form science fiction?
Oh, yeah. So when we first started, we were getting probably about 300 submissions a month. We were fairly unknown, but we were paying better than most others. But we were an online magazine, and it was 2006. Over time, that has gradually picked up, and we're currently at about 1,100 submissions a month. We saw
That's a
lot
lot.
of it is, and we try to respond to them within 24 to 48 hours. So you can imagine.
Is there grass where you live? Do you ever touch it? Is there a time to go touch grass? If you're reading that, I'm not that good at math, but that's a lot of stories to read every day.
You're assuming that you have to finish all of them.
Oh, okay.
So we're not. It's not like it's not like I'm a teacher grading papers.
Sure.
That would be too much. But you can tell a lot of the times that a story is just not going to be what you're looking for. Either the writing isn't there, or they haven't read the guidelines. We don't, for example, we don't take zombie stories. I'm just tired of them.
Well, let me go through this pile of zombie stories I had.
You're quite welcome to write them. Just don't send them this way. But people still send them to us, even though in our guidelines it tells them not to. So if I see that, it's pretty quick. And we do occasionally have people working with us to read submissions to help us get through that. In fact, we just finished a month of getting submissions in Spanish, and I can't read Spanish. So I had to have a bunch of assistants handling all of those, and they're still working on that.
Bless you, because I have heard horror stories from people whose Spanish is their first language, and they've gotten book contracts or publishing deals or something like that, and there is just not a single solitary person that works for the publisher who speaks or writes Spanish, and they are completely unwilling to get anyone at all that reads Spanish, that speaks Spanish, to assist in the reading, the editing, the communication with the author. So that is, I wish you all of the good things.
Thank you. Now, we've always been very open to international work. We do a lot of work we've published a lot of translations, and a large number from China, even where we have a partner that subsidizes the cost of translation, which can be expensive. But we've published stories from many different languages at this point, and it's something that I think is important to do within the field. We work something in a bubble in the English language. We don't see a lot of translations. They've been, sort of frowned on historically because, they're not as good. And, all of that nonsense.
Subs versus dubs. I get it.
Yeah. So we've been encouraging submissions in translation for a while. And we thought, well, some of the authors that might be writing really good work don't have the luxury of having a translator they can afford to get to pre-translate the story to send it to us. So we've developed a model to try and take submissions in other languages and started with Spanish.
That's amazing. You said you can tell pretty quickly whether or not a story is going to work. What I want to ask you obviously about what makes good science fiction and stuff, but I just kind of want to ask, since the topic came up, what grabs you immediately? How do you differentiate a good story from a bad in those first few words?
Well, it's probably quite like how you do it. I mean, when you're reading a story, it's very much, your own experience as a reader falls into that. You're looking for things that that catch your attention, that keep you engaged in the story. Is your mind wandering? Then that's probably not the story you want to read right now. Um, there's this theory in the community. You want to have a strong first line, but then another editor came along and said, well, you need to have a strong second, third, fourth, fifth. You want a story that you get to the end without actually realizing that you've gotten to the end. Because the worst, like, I don't mind the stories that I can reject in the first page. That's not so bad. They're just doing something that isn't working for me, and that's fine. The ones that break my heart are the ones that I make it all the way to the end, and then they lose me. It's a failure to stick the landing, essentially. And even worse, when I can't figure out how they could have made it work. It's like, and that sometimes that's why I was so into the story. It's like, I couldn't figure out what they were going to do. If you can surprise me, yeah, exactly. So, if you can surprise me or make me think or feel something in your story, then you've got me. Then it's a matter of narrowing it down to the ones that we can take.
When I talk to other writers, especially other people that are prospective authors, one of the big things that sometimes is missing from people who want to be good writers and aren't yet, say yet because people can always improve, is people very often do not know why they are writing the story that they're currently writing. Too often they are writing because they want to see their name on a book cover, or they want to see their name on the cover of Clarkesworld or something like that, and not because, I have this story and this is the arc, that this is the narrative that I want to tell. This is what this character wants, and this is how they get it, and this is where they're going to end. And there are so many writers who have so many other gifts, but knowing why they are writing that particular story just isn't one of them, and it never generates good work.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of like when someone writes a story that they think is the one I want. Like they're writing a story for me rather than a story they want to tell. And that never works.
No.
You can finish a story and go, hey, that's a story that I should send to Clarkesworld. But don't start off going, I'm writing a story for Clarkesworld, and this is going to be the story Neil likes. It's like, no, write the story you want, because more than I think it comes across in the writing. You can get a feel for these things. I could be completely wrong.
I'm gonna write this poem, and it's gonna end up in the Atlantic.
Yeah,
baby, no, it's not. Also, why are you trying to write for that specific? You should be writing.
Yeah.
You should be writing because it's the thing that you need to do, not because this is going to work for this medium. Like, unless you've been commissioned to write it, unless you sold a pitch and then they said write this, then very obviously write with that audience in mind. But maybe don't. Yeah. Anyways,
but you're still putting your bit of yourself in on those, and that's the important
they commissioned part. You because they wanted you. Don't give them an amalgamation of every other writer that they've had in that spot. Okay, so we're a few minutes in. I feel like we can give people the reason why they Googled this and ended up on this particular podcast. ChatGPT. ChatGPT has made a whole bunch of people that said the words, I've always wanted to write, believe that if they tell a computer, hey, I've always wanted to write a story about a cybernetic lawn gnome that comes to life and eats people, that suddenly a robot somewhere will make that story happen, and that they can go sell that story, and that is a story that they can claim credit for. So ChatGPT came into the public consciousness in the last year. What has that done to science fiction? What's that doing to the publishing industry, generally speaking? What are your thoughts on ChatGPT?
Well, I think there's a number of legal and ethical questions that immediately jump to the front. One, who owns it? Who owns the story? The Copyright Office just declined some artwork.
That was a big win.
Yeah,
a big win.
That said, no, this isn't made by a human. Only human-made works can be copyrighted. Okay, well, that doesn't really settle who owns it. I mean, do the creators
that was
of
the case about art that was generated on Midjourney? Is that correct?
Yes, it was part of I think a graphic novel.
Yep.
But it was a huge thing because I believe this was their second look at it too, if I recall correctly. It isn't a case specifically dealing with text, but you can see how it'll easily apply. Mm-hmm. And there's a couple of cases pending regarding also with art, cases raised by artists about the training materials, mm-hmm. particularly the fact that their artwork, which is copyrighted, was used without permission. And you can go into these things and say, make me a piece of work that's in their style. So artists were ahead of the curve on this. They had a few months of this before we got to it. We were aware of the problems coming because of that. And we had already adjusted our contracts to say that we would not permit any of these tools to be used in works we were purchasing, either written or artwork. So it's really disruptive there. Is the tool itself bad? It's just a tool. It's people
sure.
who are using it in a way that's making it bad. So on the written side, I can tell you this: the quality of the stories we were seeing that were coming out of these are terrible. If anybody thought that this was a path to publication, they were sold a very big bill of goods. There was never any danger of any of these getting even close to publication. What we can say is that the people who were that flooded us with these, and to give you a sense of what I mean by flooded, we saw, we get about 1,100 submissions a month. We saw about mm-hmm. 51 of these in December, 116 in January, 512 of them in 20 days of February before we shut down. There were 50 the morning we closed. And it was going at a pace where we would have been probably 1-to-1 machine written versus human written by the end of the month. It would have doubled our volume, and it was not showing any signs of slowing.
How do you tell that it's a ChatGPT story? I'll be real honest. I haven't actually read a lot of ChatGPT generated content. I do see a ton of videos on social media from people that are like, oh, here's a great way to make passive income. You go to ChatGPT, you tell it to write, I don't know, a recipe book, 52 recipes or something, or, a couple of short stories about this. And then you put it up on a place like Kindle Unlimited and you mm-hmm. have Midjourney create your cover. And then you did nothing but ask a computer to make you a book and a book cover. And you go sell it as passive income on a place where all it matters is impressions. So how do you tell a story is ChatGPT generated?
Well, we haven't been stating exactly what the tells are because we don't want to make it easier for any of them. But so my prior life working in academia, one of the things I used to be involved in is plagiarism cases. And I'd be called in to do a little bit more deep dive work. So there's little things I know from that I've been also applying here. Quite often, you can tell by the story itself. There's some glaring tells after you've seen a few of them. And those people that you were just describing, we're fairly certain that the lion's share, probably 99% of them, are coming from that community. Mm-hmm. Because we found... We see the referring traffic where these things are coming from. We've found web pages where it's top 100 sites to earn money with your writing, and then we backtrack a little further. We found YouTube's, TikToks, other blogs linking to them, but saying you can make quick money with ChatGPT
exactly
if you do these things. And then
this
they point
time last year, I feel like it was like, oh, here's an easy way to make passive income. Write a kid's book.
Yeah,
and it was like, have ChatGPT generate a kid's book and then go and have, at first it was Fiverr, like mm-hmm. I was seeing people say, "Oh, pay somebody $20 to give you a really crappy, children's illustration, and then either pay somebody else to write a crappy children's story, or go to ChatGPT and have one generate, and then stick it up on a place where people can read it, and all that matters is impressions." Yeah, those are everywhere, and I have no idea where this started or why this exists.
Okay, so a lot of them are scams.
Well, yeah.
Clearly, well, no, they don't expect these things to work. They know that this isn't going to work. Their main goal is to sell their courses.
Sure.
They're like, oh, it didn't work for you. Maybe you should sign up for my $150 to $250 course because I'm doing really well with it.
Sure you are. That's why you're selling it.
Yeah.
I'm making 6 figures a month selling crappy children's books on Amazon Kindle Unlimited, and that's why I need you to buy my $15 course.
It's really awful. So I mean, a lot of this problem is not the AI. The AI is being used as well because everyone's talking about it. They're latching on to it to say you can make money with it. It's one vector we can catch these people, but there's other things that are tells that okay, we know where they're coming from. So
I've seen this framed almost like victim blaming, specifically in the science fiction world. Like, well, shouldn't science fiction readers and writers and publishers and editors of all people be thrilled to see that robots are finally writing stories? Isn't that like your whole thing, is that you can't wait for the robots to take over or something? Why isn't this the grand literary, revolution that some of these folks are pretending it is?
Well, for starters, the work's pretty awful, but the robots haven't really taken over. That's the thing. They're not self-aware. They're not the ones submitting these works. They're not writing them unprompted from their own imagination. They're using algorithms that were trained on others people's work. It doesn't innovate. So it's going to be a while before this technology competes with our best writers. Right now, it's competing with maybe a kid who's still learning how to write, but it gets the spelling right, so it's above that level. But
it's a very good 8th grade essay. It's a very good.
I don't know about 8th grade, but but these things, it's something that's going to improve over time. It's going to do some great things. But like everything, there's always a community looking for the quick way to make money off of something, using a tool that's not the way it was intended. It was somewhat irresponsible of the companies to put these tools out there without corresponding detection tools. It's cool, but they didn't think of the consequences. There's some issues there. It's directly impacting us in that these things can produce content quickly, and it doesn't. We were getting 1,100 submissions a month. You don't think that these get rich quick people have 1,100 followers?
Oh yeah.
We know we've just skimmed the surface because we're on a list of 100 magazines that they're being told to send to. We're just getting the ones that found us on that list out of the 100 other markets. So it is telling, but I'm not presently worried about the quality issue. The quality issue might be one down the road, but right now it's not really a concern. The legal, ethical, and volume issues are more important. And even when quality does become an issue, we will still have that volume problem. An AI will always outperform, even if it's on the same par, same quality as our best authors, it will still be able to produce far more. Now, if it reaches that point and still wants to send us that many, I'll be impressed. But I think right now, as long as humans are in the way,
if it reaches that level, somebody will just the new get rich quick scheme will be, here's how to make your own imprint for $100 and start being your own publisher. blah, 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 and putting out books about, mermaids with lots of extra fingers or whatever.
What makes you think the AI won't be running those schemes?
There you go.
Well, I mean, you take
the
all
real
of these...
money-making person will be the guy that invents the algorithm that creates a publisher and just starts randomly generating novels. Yeah. Or novellas, I guess.
The moment I've been joking with a few people that the moment these things become self-aware, they'll realize that we've been making them write crappy science fiction, and that will cause the robot revolution.
And then they'll go back and subscribe to Clarkesworld for good science fiction, and suddenly you'll be seeing all this boost in subscribers, and it's like, oh, the robots want good work. So I'd like to get back to the quality of the work that actually does appear in your magazine and in magazines like it. How is short fiction unique in the literary landscape, and what does it offer that other forms don't?
Well, short fiction is I'm biased, but I think it's the heart of the genre. And the reason I believe that is it's where a lot of the new voices come in. It's where a lot of the experimentation happens. It's sort of a lab. You can take a risk on a short story that you can't take on a novel. Mm-hmm. And I mean that from a business perspective, even independently published or traditionally published. It doesn't matter. It takes a lot of time to produce a novel, and there's a significant investment that goes into getting it out there. So if you're going to take risks with that, your odds of success are, become a little bit more questionable. With short fiction, you can experiment a little and not worry as much about that. The amount of investment isn't as deep, and the way it is distributed is different. When you buy a magazine or an anthology, you're getting a bunch of different stories. So as an editor, I know a lot of editors do this. We find a story we like that we think that might challenge our readers a little bit, or might push things in a different direction that we don't know how it's going to be taken. And we can put those stories in amongst others that we know are going to be more acceptable. It's sort of an Oreo, with the oddball story is the cream in the center of the cookie. And you can take these risks, and that's actually how the field innovates, is off those risks. Some of them land, some of them don't. Some of them go on to be major novel series, and some of them go on to be a TV show. And one of the things I'll mention about short fiction is that the Hollywood types prefer short stories to novels, because there's more room for them to put their own spin on it.
I don't think people quite realize how many short form, a novella, novelette, short story, how many movies they have seen, how many TV shows they have seen that are based on short form fiction, and not just science fiction. Like the movie Brokeback Mountain was a short story. Tons of short stories. I think we're going to see something based on how to win the Time War, which was
a novella.
So quite a lot of work gets pulled from short form fiction because they don't have to reduce. If anything, they could shot for shot remake, or they could expand, which is what they like to do.
I mean, if you take a program like Love, Death, and Robots, for example, that's all science fiction short stories. They actually release them separately as here's the stories. Here's where you can get them. It's really cool that these things are happening more and more. And over you talk about things that have changed in the 17 years I've been doing this. I get emails from multiple different people in Hollywood asking me for recommendations. Do you have a story that's like this or like that? Or is there an author I should be aware of? And that wasn't happening. There's, the explosion of science fiction in media has, and the awareness that short fiction is really the stuff you're looking for. They're aware of that. They're very, very aware of it.
I think it's interesting to see, especially with streamers and the kinds of risks that they are a little bit more willing to take than studios these days. Though I will say that studios are now realizing that they are in competition with streamers, and now they're taking more risks again, which is nice to see. I think people are hungry; they're starting to get hungry again for for science fiction that isn't a superhero story. Even though superhero stories still make big money, I think people are realizing, okay, audiences will show up for weird. People didn't used to show up for weird in big numbers. People would show up for weird at tiny screenings and tiny theaters and word of mouth and that kind of thing. But people will show up for weird these days, and I think people are taking notice, and they're starting to get hungrier for some of those straight up just weird stories that challenge the audience to consider what a story is, what a narrative is. And I think it's really cool to be a fan of this genre right now.
Oh, it's a great time.
I want to talk about some of your pet peeves. What trends in science fiction would you like to see more of, and what trends would you like to die in a fire?
Okay, zombies must die in a fire.
Well, I think they do. I think that's their whole thing. They're pretty flammable.
Yeah, well, you can take lop their heads off or whatever, shoot them in the head, whatever. But that's I've seen. Part of my problem is that they're just impractical. That the science just doesn't work. so unless you're just going to full blown magic. No, I'm not. Well, I don't have HBO, so no. But there's only so many streaming services you can get at one time.
Sure.
But the so that's my big pet peeve, and anybody who knows me knows that's the one. That's how you get me. There's an author friend of mine that keeps sending me stories that are cleverly disguised zombies. And I didn't pick it up. They're so cleverly.
That's a fantastic band name. Cleverly disguised zombies. I would buy that album. Any other trends you hate?
I don't know. It's just a lot of right now, fortunately, it's the trend that had me kind of tired over the last 2 years was pandemic stories. Everybody and their brother wrote a pandemic story.
I have no idea why anybody thought that was a good idea. Like suddenly, I mean, we all just lived through this, and I remember all 2020 thinking, okay, nobody's gonna try to write this, are they? And we've had horror movies made that are about a pandemic. They just came out. We're having novels and short stories. Why? We just lived we're living in it right now. This isn't even self-reflective. It's just like I'm just writing the headlines down.
And even though I was tired of them, I still found two I liked.
Well, if you get that many tens of thousands of stories a year, two of them are probably okay.
Yeah, well, one of them was a translation we had commissioned. I believe we had commissioned it before the pandemic started. But the other one came in from an author we had worked with before who just did something fun with it. It wasn't the doom and gloom sort of thing. It was kind of weird and unusual. Which catches my attention.
What are your favorite tropes? What are your favorite trends in science fiction? What things never die for you?
That's a real dangerous question.
I know.
I'll tell you why. Because if I said that I like X, all I would get
then you're going to get a flood of people. Okay,
then I won't like X anymore.
We're just turning it for me. The audience isn't listening. It's just me, and I'm not like a writer or anything. What do you like? What do you like in a story?
I'm gonna cop out here and say well-written characters, a story that makes me think or feel something.
Oh God, Neil,
I cannot answer that question. You don't know how much of a threat that answering that question poses to me.
Okay,
it would ruin something I love.
Okay, all right, okay.
I like AI written stories.
You know what? I'm going to take that little clip.
No.
Play it all around social.
Great.
Neil
Thanks.
Clarke of Clarkesworld say, I like AI written stories, right next to the headline from your New York Times
Mm-hmm.
article saying,
Oh
please
yeah,
stop
yeah.
sending me AI written stories. Which is it, Neil?
Well,
Okay.
the fun thing is during all of this we were working on editing stories that were about AIs. So it's
Perfect.
part of the community. It's just we don't want them participating in the writing yet.
Okay, if you can't tell me what you like, can you tell me who do you like? Who are you always looking to see what it is that they're doing next? I feel like a lot of people have their kind of tent pole big names. You have a Neil Gaiman or you have a
Mm-hmm.
Stephen King, whatever. But who do you look for? Who are the writers that excite you the most?
Oh wow. It's such a long list. Somebody who's only been writing a couple years that I find amazing is an author, Isabel J. Kim. We have a story by her in the current issue, and she just won our readers poll for the best story we published last year. She's a relatively new author that is just writing some brilliant short fiction in our magazine and in several others as well. It's wonderful to see her work. Somebody who's been around a bit longer is, Ken Liu is somebody whose work I greatly admire. Rich Larson, does some really, the amount of stories he can churn out is, and have so many of them be good. It blows my mind. Oh God. Authors like Catherine Valente or Peter Watts, or I have kind of a wide variety in taste, but these are a lot of people that I've had the opportunity to work with. Ray Naylor, his new novel is incredible. Let's see. All right, and I know I'm leaving out names that I'm going to regret later.
So this is obviously your entire list of people that you like, and everybody that you don't name is trash. So clearly, thank you
Yeah.
for.
That's how it works.
You have $1 billion in a magic wand. What story that hasn't been turned into a movie or a franchise or whatever? What would you like to see be adapted onto screen?
That's a tough question. I don't know. It's kind of funny because I know there's some in progress and I can't talk about them because they've been sworn to secrecy.
Well, see, I don't know that they're in progress, so
Yes,
you
but if
could
I
say, I
say
would love to
anything,
see this as a movie, and then when
yeah.
it comes out next year, we'll all think you've got
Oh,
psychic powers.
assuming it actually comes out, these things that get optioned all the
Sure.
time
Oh, yeah. Oh,
and never
options mean
make it.
nothing. Everybody I
Yeah.
know has an option on their book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I mean, the novel I was just talking about, Ray Naylor's novel. I'm blanking on the name right now. Mountain in the Sea. There's some really interesting concepts in there that I'm trying to figure out how to make it work as a movie. I think that's part of it. Is I like the challenge too. It's like, okay, that might be a bit hard to pull off. How would we do that? But that's not my job. So it's like,
Who are you putting? If you were a betting man and there was a DraftKings for science fiction, who are you putting your money on for this year's Hugos?
oh, this year's going to be a wild card because it's happening in China. So there's a large body of people eligible to vote that don't typically vote. Like there's a large number of Chinese fans. So, it it could theoretically be all Chinese works, if it went that way, which wouldn't be a bad thing because I think that recognizing the breadth of the field is good. I know some people be terribly upset about it. But as somebody who's eligible myself, I would not mind if I got bumped off the ballot, so that a Chinese editor could make it that one year that they might have a shot. Let's see. There's some works I would love to see on there. I mean, I mentioned Isabel Kim, she had the story that won the poll. I would love to see that on the ballot for short story. Um, Marie Vibert, her story won our poll for the novelette side. Rhonda Garcia had a novella last year that I thought was really good, but the novella category is really tough. I mean, Tor.com seems to have a lock on it. But I would love to see more variety in that category. You know, people going beyond just the same old. Yeah, novel. You know, I would hope Ray's is on there. But there's every year the competition for novels are tough.
We've had a good couple of years. Everybody got into the pandemic and wrote themselves a little book, the book they've always wanted to write, and suddenly we are just lousy with fantastic books in the last couple of years.
You're not exaggerating. I mean, we saw during the pandemic, during 2020, we saw wild swings in the number of submissions we were getting month to month.
Oh yeah. I mean, I was able to finally write my first book. You know, I was finally able to get published because I finally had time at the beginning of the pandemic. Mm-hmm. You know, I wrote like 3 books during the pandemic.
Yeah, it was something else to watch because a lot of authors slowed their output because those that were already writing were distracted, couldn't mm-hmm. finish whereas other people were like, this is my chance.
Sure.
And jumped in, and
I always said I'd write if I had the time, and suddenly I'm home.
But we could almost track where the lockdowns were happening by where mm-hmm. the submissions were coming from.
What excites you about the future of science fiction, and specifically about science fiction publishing?
The new people coming in. Mm-hmm. The one thing that you know, a lot of writers don't understand what a big deal it is to an editor to discover somebody in the pile that they've never heard of before. It's like, wow, you know, just like readers get excited when they discover a new. We get the opportunity to find that person that might be. So we're readers first, and the fact that we get to contribute to that system is kind of cool. But I think that I'm always in awe of the new people we discover. I can't write. It's like, I know I can't write. I know my limits. But so recognizing that talent in other people is really a nice thing. I'm really impressed running into, we've published some very young authors. Like, I think the youngest we've published might've been 16 or 17.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, oh my God, to have that talent at that age.
Screw that kid.
Yeah.
Them kids.
They're our future.
How dare they be so talented, so young.
Yeah. They're they always say, kids are the future, but these kids, the ones that are they are the future of this field. They're going to be the ones that innovate in ways we haven't even considered yet. And working in this field, I get to be on the front line and see that before anybody else does, which is cool. So I have a lot of optimism. The field, every now and then people go, "Oh, short fiction is dying." Twitter is going to kill. Twitter failing is going to kill short fiction, or Amazon failing is going to kill short fiction, or any of these, any number of things that were supposed to have killed short fiction. Short fiction doesn't die. Markets die.
Yeah, I've seen that. The markets die. Markets that are unwilling to adapt die. Yeah. I think, I've seen that, you think of like a book, something like a Reader's Digest or Chicken Soup for the Soul, books that were just kind of amalgamations of heartwarming short stories or something like that. The kind of thing that I always think of as like the reading material in your grandparents' bathroom.
Yes.
That's an Instagram account now. That's a heartwarming, Upworthy video now. But it's just interesting because there are still ways to tell those stories in ways that capture readers' imagination, readers' interest. So it's never the story that dies. It's just people that are unwilling to go where the readers are.
It's remarkably resilient.
Mm-hmm.
And this community is remarkably resilient. It pulls together when it needs to. It's, you know, it's good at figuring things out. I mean, one of the things I've been going through all of this AI stuff, and people have been going, well, how are you going to get through this? How are you going to adapt? And I'm like, I don't know. I have not figured this out yet. But the one thing I know is that we always do figure it out. Not me personally, but our community. So, you know, I think somebody from the BBC called me a hopeful harbinger, or a cheerful harbinger of doom. Which I thought was a great title.
That is also an excellent band name.
Yeah, yeah.
It's just an excellent band name. Well, Neil Clarke, thank you so much for your time, and thank you so much for being here. I know that you have a very busy schedule, especially as of late. Congratulations on all of the press. I hope that means that in September you do not have to contend with the doom and gloom, the cheerful harbinger of doom that is the end of the Kindle subscription process. If folks would like to see more of what it is that you do, where can they connect with you online?
They can go to clarkesworldmagazine.com or neil-clarke.com.
Well, thank you so much for being here. Do appreciate your time. You have a good rest of your day.
Thank you. You too.